We are the tribe from the north, we're brave and we're bold. Defeating our rivals never gets old. Making our way to the Big Sky Conference. Watch out, 'cause here comes the silver and gold. Whoa, whoa. This is Tubbs at the club for the Vandals of Idaho.
Welcome back, Tribe from the North, Brave and Bold, to the unofficial podcast of your Idaho Vandals and your Vandal affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network for a live reaction of Idaho's 42-24 victory over the Southern Utah Thunderbirds. Joining me for the live reaction, we have the Professor Brian Martson. How are you, Brian?
We have a win to talk about, dude, so I'm doing okay.
Yeah, it kind of gets us out of the drolls of the bottom of the Big Sky Conference. It'll be interesting to see I don't know how far we move up beating a conference winless Southern Utah. Am I glad that we're the team that doesn't allow Southern Utah to get that possible last conference win in the Big Sky? Very excited.
Dude, no question. And I think off of last week, I do not think it's going to be possible to be at a lower low for Vandal football than we were off of what NAU looked like. Getting a win, it was senior night. The attendance certainly looked better against Southern Utah than it did against NAU. Yeah, this is a good day to be a Vandal. There will be better days. There better be better days in the future. But today, definitely a good day.
Yep. Let's start it off with kind of like the big storyline from this one. Roschon Johnson able to get 6 touchdowns on the ground, which beat the previous record of a non-quarterback to score touchdowns in a game. It was 4. And I believe what I gathered from the bit of research I was able to do, we had a wide receiver score 4, and I think we had 2 running backs that once scored 4. So we had like a 3-way tie with 4 scoring touchdowns by a non-quarterback. And Roschon Johnson absolutely smatters the record with 6. And he had 1 called back to a holding penalty in which we probably could have got him a 7. So, impressive day for Roschon Johnson. You got any kind of like takeaways on that kind of performance from the big man?
It was probably, and this has been on brand for Roschon when he's healthy and when he gets enough carries. His longest rush was 20 yards. He rushes 30 times for 174. That means he was just stable the entire game. Like, this wasn't a high average. He averaged 5.6 yards a rush. But this wasn't a big total pumped up by a couple big runs. He was just gashing Southern Utah for 5 to 10 yards all the time. We also saw a little bit more diverse set of rushing plays called this week in that Roschon certainly went up the middle just fine. He also had some outside rushes, which we just had not had a ton of those this year. But Roschon, really from start to finish, Southern Utah just had no answer for him. They weren't strong enough. Idaho's line had a nice showing too. But Roschon, to me, this is a theme, Chris. We're going to talk about it more. This is the Roschon we've seen in spring games, probably 3 times.
Spring game hero. I feel like every spring we talk about how Roschon has this amazing spring game. And we have to reel everybody back because we're like, yeah, but he just has never been able to put it together in a season. And you could say he still obviously hasn't. But it's games like this. We still have 1 more year with him if he chooses to come back. He's a redshirt junior, which means he's technically a senior. But I know there's 2 games left. I think most Vandal fans are kind of viewing this because it's the end of the home season. It's kind of like a closing of the season per se. It's a good way for a lot of Vandal fans that probably won't tune into the last 2 games. To have a good taste in their mouth of having that performance. He almost gets 200 yards. He gets 6 touchdowns. You nailed it. This is spring game Roschon finally at a game, and it was awesome to see. And it gives you that sliver that if he comes back next year, depending on what the offensive philosophy could be different next season, we're still just stacked in the running back room. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Elijah Cummings had a good – sorry, I don't want to get all the way to Cummings yet.
No, dude, that's fine. You stole my point. I was going to say Elijah Cummings, 13 rushes, 99 yards.
Yeah.
Southern Utah had no answer for us on the ground. Now, Elijah Cummings had more of the rushes on the outside throughout this game. But we've known both these guys are good. And a thing both of us have probably cited throughout the season at times is fatigue, that we're not diverse enough in some of our rushing calls. We saw it today. We saw 2 running backs who may be back next year. So listeners also know at this point, we're finishing out the season, but part of what we're looking at as Vandal fans is what's generalizable into the future now for us.
Yeah.
Those 2 guys look great today. Caveat, of course, it was against Southern Utah. Southern Utah is not a good football team, but we looked good. Idaho had not looked really good on the football field for a while. So this is just nice to be able to say that. It's a nice palate cleanser, like you said, rushing the ball like we did, multiple rushers looking good, even though we had moments in the second half where it looked like that, that Vandal PTSD starts coming back when we make the drives. Beaudry throws a pick in the end zone. Southern Utah scores some points. That Vandal PTSD comes. Didn't matter. Roschon first, Elisha too. They were just too much for Southern Utah to do anything against Idaho.
Yep. And it's just so cool to see. Like, I think we figured it out. Like, we've talked about it on this show, right? Like, well, we've hinted at it. Like, Beaudry appears to give us the best chance as an offense that looks remotely competitive in terms of it can't just sneak up on you for one game and really do good. The threat of him being able to throw the ball is noticeable. He completed almost 70% of his passes. But the biggest knock that we've always had with him is that though he has a better QBR, though he has a better completion percentage, he keeps care of the ball. Like, he doesn't throw a ton of interceptions. He also hasn't thrown a ton of touchdowns. And we've kind of talked about that's been Idaho's issue is drives kind of stall out. This system of like, all right, we'll just let them get to that point where they're stalling out and then just feed these running backs. And it appears to work. We've had a great rushing offense the entire season, but we only had that threat of rushing. Now when you just paired enough with that threat of the pass, it might not get into the end zone. We might not be that team that functions when the safeties can just play up on our shallow crosses around the end zone. We're not going to be able to throw the fade ball to the back corner, but you can hand it to Roschon Johnson, who averaged over 5 yards a carry today, or Elijah Cummings, who averaged over 7, and you'll get in the end zone. I think we saw the blueprint. If we're going to be competitive in these next 2 games, this is what what the offense can be with Beaudry. Is we're not going to get passing touchdowns, but man, with this rushing attack, we can get a lot of rushing touchdowns.
And the great point, Chris. And I'm just going to acknowledge this facet because it's existed for Idaho football. Because the Zach Borish premise isn't going to go away while he's on the roster, because Zach Borish is a talented guy. But clearly, from a practical perspective, Petrino's not going to let him throw. So for Idaho, we need a guy in there who can complete those short passes like Beaudry did. Beaudry is 16 of 23 today for 217 yards. He did throw 2 picks. And against a good team, those picks would have mattered. They didn't matter against Southern Utah because Southern Utah is not a good team. But we were able to move the ball. We were able to turn those drives into scores. I know Roschon was one who capitalized on all 6 of our touchdowns. But some of those scenarios where we moved the ball well, both passing and rushing, Mike Beaudry certainly set up at least a couple of those touchdowns. Mm-hmm. For Idaho to take a next step, we obviously have to be able to do that against teams who aren't Southern Utah. But we got into the end zone. Look, we scored 42 points on offense. I talked about it last week that if we're only going to score 24 points, it's going to be tough to win. Well, hey, we got 42. We got a good outing. Really, this is, I think I said earlier, this is the Vandal team we thought we had at the end of the spring that was competitive in all those games, that needed to be just a little bit better to make that push for about 500.
But could we argue that is exactly it? We're seeing what it looks like when we have just the slightest bit of consistency in a quarterback that I guess Paul trusts at least, right? I know a lot of us would like to see Borish throw the ball, but with a quarterback that apparently Paul trusts, this is kind of what we can do with Mike Beaudry is this. I mean, first downs, 33-16. Like, we controlled the time of possession. This is what we thought we needed from Idaho. It's like, don't give teams like Eastern Washington, when we play them, the ball 17 times. Like, control it. Let your defense do what they do. We allowed 37 yards rushing today, 1.4 yards per rush. Like, our defense is effective at stopping the run. Still's got some work to do preventing the pass, but this was that game where, like, if we just don't let the other team's offense get in a groove, our offense will be able to weasel its way and, you know, find itself in opportunities where we can put up 42 points. So I feel like this was, I mean, you nailed it. This is exactly what we thought we would get from this team going into this season, where teams like Southern Utah, we definitely would beat, and we'd be more competitive with the Easterns and Montanas. Not saying we'd win, but like those games would not be as big of, you know, losses as they were, to where it was never really in doubt for either of those two teams.
No, you're right. That is going to be the what if for this season, because in spite of how frustrating the season's felt, Chris, this team is about one game behind where we thought they'd be. We thought, most of us in the show, we thought we'd beat Northern Arizona. But heading into Northern Arizona, our record was exactly what we thought it was going to be. The thing that was different was no one was prepared for us to get decimated against Eastern like that and follow it up with getting annihilated against Montana back-to-back weeks. So, yeah, this team, look against Southern Utah. Southern Utah rushes for 37 yards total, less than 2 yards per rush. Yeah, that's the rushing defense we thought that we had coming out of the spring. Mm-hmm. Justin Miller for Southern Utah has certainly not a bad game at all. He's 23 of 36 for 301 yards and 1 touchdown. He also got sacked 5 times. That's the Idaho pressure we were hoping we would see this year. Heck, on 1 possession towards the end of the game. And in the fourth quarter, the game really did feel put away, but Southern Utah wasn't dying. They were still fighting. That's part of why Southern Utah's at times felt kind of frisky, is because they don't give up, but they don't win. Chuck O'Connell had 2 sacks and a strip fumble on one Southern Utah possession alone. I guess that's another story for me too, is senior night. We saw some great play out of Trey Walker, and we saw some of the Charles O'Connell that it's not that he's been rough this year, Chris, at all, because Charles O'Connell's still been good. He's going to be an all-time what-if Vandal for me. Because
2019 was just, man, his upward trajectory was just to the roof. And then, that injury just derailed him. And, like, it's just been, like, every game he plays, like, you're not shocked by what he's doing. But you're like, man, you're really getting close to where you were in 2019, where it's like he never really got back or past what he was in 19. But he's still just been an outstanding player. So,
and with an injury like an Achilles, it's not shocking for a guy to lose some burst with an Achilles. I mean, that in basketball world, an Achilles injury is one of the worst injuries a guard can possibly have.
Yeah.
So him losing maybe a little bit of burst, not surprising at all. And also, like, the worst time ever to have that happen. And it's the end of 19. And then he gets the COVID season where practice gets screwed up. I bet his rehab got screwed up as well in terms of being able to show up places. But seeing him close out senior night the way he did with, I think, his best performance of the season, again, asterisk Southern Utah, but with him looking dominant again at some points the way we thought he could be, or we hoped he could be again, it's at least a good way to close out the Kibbe Dome for 2021.
Yep. And you kind of touched on it there, Charles O'Connell, like last time you were going to see him in the Kibbe Dome. Had a great performance. Tyrese Dedman, second on the team with tackles with 7. Trey Walker, who's a junior, but we've heard is going to be attempting to go to the draft. That's why he's a part of senior night. Now, maybe we'll reach out and try to see if we get confirmation from the SID or whatever, if he's trying to do the Christian Ellis method of, like, not hire an agent, so if he doesn't get drafted, he can come back. But for all intents and purposes, probably the last game we see Trey Walker. And then also we kind of talked about it on our show, which is funny. You brought up the sacks. Well, Christian Lightburn, is that right? Not Caleb. Well, that's Caleb Lightborn. 54. It is Christian Blackburn was the guy that I believe Boatman gave a huge shout out to as like a walk-on guy who like stuck it out and da-da-da. He got 1 or 2 sacks in this game. So another senior who we really have not heard much of outside of special teams gets an opportunity to play on senior day and, you know, makes his best of it. Has his Rudy moment, gets a sack. So always cool to see.
And another player that I want to talk about, 2 wide receivers for a second. Although spoiler alert, none are seniors, so I'm killing our senior night theme for a second. Terez Traynor again has a pretty solid game. Terez Traynor, had we not lost Beaudry for some of the games, is probably the top receiver yards wise in conference.
Yeah.
This year, today, he's 6 receptions for 90 yards. Didn't get in the end zone. Again, he helped set up touchdowns that Rashawn Johnson finished. But Terez Traynor again, when he gets a chance, he is clearly one of the best receivers in the league talent wise. And a guy we've talked about on the show a little bit, he's starting to get some reps that we haven't seen for a while. Just Puffer, out of Arizona. He's a guy we've talked about for a while because he's a big target. Now, it's not like his stat line was out of this world, a catch for 18 yards, but he's had a couple big plays in the last 2 weeks. That's an emerging talent for us to watch for next year, too.
Redshirt freshman, yeah. So we get 3 more years of Puffer. So we do lose Makai Stevenson. That will be the one senior. So that kind of blows because we only got him for a year. I would assume Cottrell Haywood comes back and hopefully can kind of reclaim some of that role. No idea what's been going on with Cottrell this year, a guy who has so much promise. But you're right. Doesn't Terez Traynor kind of feel like he could be the next Jeff Cotton? Like, you remember in 2018 – Jeff Cotton comes onto the team. He has a couple plays, but everybody's talking about like him and Cottrell. It's basically equals. And, he's in from JC, so we only get 2 years with him. But like, coming into 2019, none of us were like saying that Jeff Cotton was going to be NFL. Jeff Cotton was going to be. But then in 2019, he just took off. Terez Traynor has all the makings of that. Like a guy who's in the system. He's making noise. Looks good, but he's kind of had Stevenson and Puffer and at times Cottrell and, Hatton. But, like, next year he could just be that guy that absolutely just takes over and becomes a stud, which is going to be really interesting because you talk about all of our running backs are basically coming back. All of our wide receivers are basically coming back. All but Beaudry in the quarterback room are probably coming back. Our offense is going to be the part of our team that has so much returning next year. It's going to be sad because we're losing a lot on defense. But
yeah, fingers crossed the offensive guys come back because this isn't just an Idaho thing. This is an everyone thing. Transfer portal, it is something that can hit teams depending on what's going on. But you're right. This is a team that is not offensively. We're not senior laden. Like we will not have Beaudry next year. But for that point, Beaudry wasn't declared the starter first week of the season. That was going to be CJ Jordan. So, that part could be a constant for next year.
And we've seen what just a year can do in terms of a freshman quarterback, somebody like Giovanni McCoy. You look at, I know they didn't win today, but Cam Miller over at North Dakota State coming into this year, a lot of people were like, he's good, but he's too young or whatever. And now he's beating out a former Elite 11 quarterback, and North Dakota State likes him. Like, it's crazy with I think people forget these guys have like 6 months to train as a freshman. So, like, expect Giovanni McCoy to take a step forward next year as well. If we don't play him again, he'll be a redshirt freshman. So, like, we have him coming back. We have Austin Webb. We have Crowton McLeod. So we'll have a quarterback room. We'll see if Boris gets more work in the offseason. So, like, it will be sad to lose Beaudry, but the loss at the quarterback position should not really impact our outlook into next season. I think most of us feel we should be able to replace Beaudry's production. Beaudry has been a great stopgap while we try to get some of these younger guys up. I mean, that's why we brought him in as a grad transfer, and he's done that role well. Had he stayed healthy, we may have found one more win on the schedule so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'd take a guy like Mike Beaudry over Cam Humphrey at Montana, and any day, no question. I am hoping we find a better way to use Zach Borish on the offense.
Yeah, one carry today?
One carry. They have him on special teams. It is, to me, this has been a frustration in that he's clearly earned, in my mind, touches on the offensive side of the ball. I'm fine saying that quarterback is not the ideal place for him. And honestly, if Petrino's not going to let him throw, Petrino should have figured this out. Quarterback's not the ideal place to get him touches. But we've seen how he can rush and break tackles. If we're going to say that the backfield in terms of running back is too loaded to get him touches, I mean, maybe he can be our like a short yardage receiver, get him in space to make people miss. We got to do something with Borish other than special teams, one rush up the middle, and God knows what else.
Yeah, and I just watching other games today, watching South Dakota State, North Dakota State, they lined up in kind of like the old wing tee kind of set, but then the quarterback motioned out from under center is on like the one, and then they snapped it directly to their All-American running back Pierre Strong, and he wildcatted it. It's like, do that stuff with it. Like, have some fun with Borish. We're not saying like you can't use him or you have to hand it off to him directly or give him a quarterback read option. I'm saying, like, have fun with it. Do that, and then have him throw to Beaudry or run it up the middle or run an option like that. Like, just find a way. And now the fact that Beaudry's in, we're using him for like one play a game is like, I mean, he basically almost won us 2 games. Like, the guy's athletic. We got to find ways to use him. Obviously today we didn't need to, but it's Southern Utah who hasn't won a conference game. So like, we got Montana State, who looks like the best team in the conference, if not the best team in the country next week in Bozeman. And then we get the Bengals, who we haven't beaten in Pocatello in 20, 30 years. So, we can't rest on our laurels with this win because this was by far probably the easiest game on our schedule. And we have 2 of our, well, not our toughest. We have our toughest game coming up. And then Idaho State we all never said it was going to be easy. I think most of us predicted us to lose that game at the end of the year in our preseason thing. So nothing from this performance gives me any more confidence that we'll be able to beat the Bengals, even though the Bengals are worse than I think most of us thought they would be. You
answered the question I had for you before I even asked. I was going to ask if this result changes your temperature on Idaho football. It sounds like mostly no at this point.
No. I mean, I think we all talked about it on the pre-show, right? Like, all of us are still pretty like upset by how the season has gone, but all of us predicted Southern Utah to win. Dallas was the only one that even needed a little bit of convincing to get them over the fence because we all knew it's senior night. Seniors are going to come out to play. You can see it. All the statistical leaders are basically seniors tonight, where senior plays in that position. So it's one of those things. It's hard. You have an opponent like Southern Utah coming in, you probably are going to be able to beat a 50-50 coin toss game when it's senior night. It's just it's a reason to BYOE, right? Bring your own energy. And that's what we did today. And even with that, Brian, does it alarm you any that even with this performance, we had a very typical Idaho second half? We go into the halftime up 28-10. In the second half, we only score 14 points, only allowing Southern Utah to score 14 points as well. But once again, we have a pretty good first half where we put up a lot of points and then struggle to in the second half. And I get that Petrino was trying to learn from his mistakes against like a Portland State and have better clock management. And with that 18-point lead, obviously we see it by keeping the ball on the ground and getting 33 first downs. We were just trying. But once again, it's like Idaho came out in the second half and the offense just kind of came out flat. And the defense, I guess they give up basically consistent points. But I felt like in the second half, Southern Utah had better looking drives than they did in the first half.
You felt that because they did. The good news for Idaho is, 14 second half points. That's our most second half points against a D1 team this year. So, kind of okay, I guess. Still not ecstatic about it. But I'm going to answer my question about the temperature on Idaho football with my answer to your second half question, Chris. I don't think we win this game if it's against many other teams other than Southern Utah. Idaho still the energy was not the same in the second half. Now, it's probably worth acknowledging we were pretty close to scoring a third touchdown. Beaudry threw a pick in the end zone. If that doesn't happen, then we probably score 21 points, and it's easily our best second half. But the Petrino come apart that all of us are terrified of happening. I had flashbacks during a little bit of the second half. So this doesn't really change my outlook on this team. It is nice to have a good thing to talk about with Idaho football after, honestly, if you look at our calendar, it's been since Portland State. That's a three-game
losing streak.
Yeah, and the second half against Portland State was not great either. So honestly, we had around almost a calendar month where we didn't have what you call a great Idaho week to talk about since Portland State. So it's nice. It feels good to finally get the evidence in front of us that, yes, this team that is more talented than the bottom of the league. We're still around the bottom of the league, but we're more talented than a team like Southern Utah, Cal Poly. I think we're more talented than Idaho State. I think we're more talented than Northern Colorado. It's good to see a little bit of evidence in front of us that we actually maybe are, even though that's what we think. But my opinion on Idaho certainly isn't changing after this game. It was more heading into this week with how the season's gone. I was terrified that we were going to find out there is no floor. But we found out there is a floor. It was last week against NAU.
Yep. Any kind of closing points on Idaho versus Southern Utah you want to touch, or do you think we've kind of hit it all? I think we know what we are, and we got a big one next week.
Chris, come on. You have been wanting to say RIP to Southern Utah forever, and you're going to skip that chance right now?
You're right. We got to kick them out of the WAC, or kick them out so hard they're going to the WAC. Just real quick for kicks and giggles.
Hey, Chris, what's Idaho's record against Southern Utah in the Big Sky?
3-0.
Yeah.
Good. Never lose to those clowns. I remember one of my first experiences in the Big Sky was Southern Utah. And I think it was homecoming in 2018, maybe. And I was texting Kyler, and I was saying, like, hey, Kyler Neal from Eagles Power Hour, for people that don't know, wow, the Big Sky offensive linemen are really small. And obviously later we played Eastern, and he goes, did you find that to be similar for Eastern? I was like, nope, it was definitely just a Southern Utah thing. So one of my first takes in the Big Sky was how small their line was. So I'm glad that I'll never have to say their offensive line ever scared me. And Fresno State just housing a punt against Boise State. Go. Touchdown Bulldogs. I know that's what everybody was like waiting for during this broadcast. They have one game left against Weber. Weber struggles against Portland State today. Does Southern Utah leave the Big Sky Conference with no wins?
No question. No. I mean, look, Weber State lost to Portland State, but on this show, we don't let people forget Portland State's top 5 program. Teams are going to struggle. I mean, Idaho is a different monster in dominating Portland State in the first half. But all jokes aside, the Portland State-Weber State thing is going to be a point that I'm going to jump to in talking about what the season could have been. Because Portland State, we joke about them. They're not a terrible team. They're just not a really good team.
They're the bar. Raw, and I use the bar.
Yeah, Idaho dominated Portland State looking like a playoff team, and that Portland State team just ended Weber State's season, which is just another version of this. Part of the frustration of this Idaho team, look, if they suck, if everyone on Idaho sucks, we're annoyed, but we're not as disappointed with some of the outcomes we've had. It's because we know this team has some talent. But Southern Utah, they're different. I don't think they have talent. I think they don't have enough talent. They have some. I'd take Justin Miller on the team in a heartbeat. Yeah. There's some of their wide receivers that I'd take in a heartbeat, but like you said, with their size, they're just not that big. I think Southern Utah has, weirdly, an impressive amount of heart to kind of keep fighting through as many games as they do with as many losses as they have. They still have moments where they look competitive, like in this game. Southern Utah could have easily rolled over. They didn't. They did their best to make it a game, and the result was in question a little bit in the fourth quarter. But no, I don't think they're going to beat Weber State. I think the next celebration is next week, the first week in the Big Sky this season, Chris, where we don't have a Southern Utah game to talk about.
Correct. They have a bye week, second to last week of the season.
I think we get to find out how good it feels to not have to talk about Southern Utah, which isn't a put down to Southern. It is a put down to Southern Utah. But
it'll be a preview into all of next season and forever and ever.
So
wouldn't it be the biggest thing ever if within this week somehow the WAC just gets blown up as a thing that doesn't happen anymore with the loss of Sam Houston State, and somehow Southern Utah ends up back in the freaking Big Sky?
What if what happens, Chris? And I'm pivoting to this talk because we're clearly almost done recording.
Yeah. We're about to end.
Let's just jump into summer talk right now, because why not? What if it blows up the WAC's initial plans, and what they do is we form an intermountain conference that can be a WAC FBS conference,
and then Southern Utah has to crawl back to the Big Sky with like Portland State and Cal Poly.
Oh my God. We can dream, right?
We can dream. Hey, it's crazy time right now. I just want to end this stat. Congratulations, Southern Utah. If you do not beat Weber State next week, That means your last Big Sky Conference win will be in the Grand Canyon rivalry, 31-30 on November 16th, 2019. Yes, that is the same Northern Arizona team that Mason Petrino balled out against. So take that with a grain of salt. They will also finish, since 2018, 3-27 in the Big Sky Conference. So fans, it could be worse.
I got to throw another one in there. This was part of the deep dive segment on the Mint that I did not know was a segment this week. Southern Utah, if we subtract them beating Cal Poly in the spring, which we should, because Cal Poly was so bad they quit and Southern Utah only won by 10, their last Big Sky road win is at the end of the season in 2017 against UC Davis. That is a long time.
Even Idaho has won in 2019 against that aforementioned Northern Arizona. So, yeah, Southern Utah, Kings of the Conference in 2016? Man, how the mighty have fallen. DeMario Warren, I mean, you assume Seth. Once again, we complain about where we're at with our coaching. How does a guy like that stick around that long when he takes over for Big Sky champion Southern Utah in 2015? He takes over in 2016, has won 6-5 season, and has barely won any games.
Yeah, they won the league. They tied for winning the league in 2017, and they've been terrible since. The question I have, and Chris, I'm loving filibustering the end right now.
Yeah.
How in God's name did Montana need a late field goal block to beat this team?
Montana is what Idaho usually is in the Big Sky, just a better version of it, where you literally do not know what team is going to show up every week. It could be the world beaters that are able to go toe-to-toe with Eastern Washington, or it could be the team that loses to Northern Arizona in Greeley after beating Eastern Washington. You know, they just play to their competition, except today. They blew out the freaking Bears. But, all right, Southern Utah, good to see you. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Thank you for listening to Tubs of the Club. Thank you to all our patrons. It's brought to you by Hughes River Expeditions. We will see you guys on Tuesday. Brian, how's basketball working?
Well, basketball, we're choosing, when I say we, I mean I am choosing to wait until I get to actually see Idaho play in person because we have such a new roster. I really just don't want to bore listeners or myself talking for 40 minutes about guys I haven't seen play. I've listened to the broadcast of our exhibition games, and the real quick temperature check is we have convincingly won exhibition games. We should not get excited about that, but we should be happy that we're not losing exhibition games like we had last few seasons. So fingers crossed that matters. I'm going to be in Moscow November 10th, which is this Wednesday, for the opener against Long Beach State. After I've seen this team play, I'm fine talking about them. I just don't want to waste people's time talking about all these transfers that could be promising. But, you know, I can't say anything other than read their stats from Grand Canyon.
Yeah, well, we might try to do one of these, I was going to say, because I'll be watching the game. So we'll figure it out, and we'll give you guys more information on Tuesday about what to expect on Wednesday. So if you listen to our podcast usually, be a great time to watch it live on youtube.com, Tubs of the Club, on Tuesdays at about, what do we do, about 7:30 Mountain, 6:30 Pacific usually?
Yeah, right around there.
Right around there. All right, we'll see you guys Tuesday. Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
So raise your glass and have a drink with me. Here's to the Vandals in the crowd, all just out there living the dream. Right up one and only Moscow drink.